Weird Shit I've Seen as a Marine by 035 None. Growing up playing video games and watching war movies, I didn't think twice about joining the Marines so I could be in the infantry. I went through all the training and the unwelcome hardship that really makes you reconsider your decision. Anyway, I got stationed to a desert base known as 29 Palms, the largest piece of military-controlled land in the US. It covers approximately 930 square miles in total. It's fucking huge. It's in Southern Carolina, a few hours away from Mexico. When you're that far out, you start to see some shit. Anyway, fast forward to my first field op and me losing my shit. To put things into perspective as to how far away we are from civilization, the closest man-made object is about a 3-hour drive away. This day was particularly hot because it broke 130, as if the sun said, "I told you I could." So we spent the day hiding in camouflage tents and learning various military tactics. Once the sun set, we were set off into the night to get some realistic training done. At night, we practiced using our night vision optic to do simple shit, like loading and reading maps. It produces an image off the ambient infrared light, so you can see a lot more with that shit than the naked eye. The sky is just absolutely cluttered with stars. I can see a shooting star every few seconds, even the Milky Way. It's pretty damn cool. Finally, after roaming around aimlessly for what felt like forever, we head back and were granted a few hours of sleep. I lay down and finally start to drift off. I'm suddenly woken up after what felt like 10 minutes and I get up instantly. "Get up, bitch. You're on watch." God damn it. I get dressed and stand at my post dutifully like I'm told at the checkpoint. I'm given a radio and told only to lift the barbed wire after it gets approved over the radio. It's maybe around 2 a.m. and everyone else in my company is dead asleep, except for myself and the officer in the comm truck. All I can hear are coyotes. I decide to start looking at the stars with my night vision. I hear a coyote yelp off in the distance and think nothing of it. A few minutes later, another Marine comes from over a small hill in front of me. Nothing crazy, probably just out there taking a shit. He walks towards me, but his eyes, they don't reflect any light. Rationally, one of us is probably dehydrated, so I think nothing of it. As he approaches me, and after a few seconds of staring at me, he just simply says, "Can I come in?" His voice didn't sound right. No inflection or questioning tone. Weird. I ask him what his name was and why he was out so far taking a dump. He tells me his name is Sergeant Wright, and he ignores my dumb question. Same weird voice. Granted, I'm new to the unit, so I don't know anyone named Sergeant Wright, but I still had to verify it. "Maine, this is Road Guard 1. There was a Sergeant Wright requesting entry. Over."
Road Guard 1, this is Maine. There is no Sergeant Wright in this company, and the closest unit is 25 miles away. Make sure... Shit. Get the fuck back here, right now. Don't let him in, or even look at him. Run.
As the weird dude started to hear this, his face changed to severely angry, like he wanted to rip my throat out and drink my blood. By the time I got back, everyone's awake. All of the vehicle lights are turned on, and everyone is packing up, scrambling into the trucks. We leave a lot of shit behind, like tents, water, and food. We drive for 3 hours back. I never got an explanation from anyone, but my squad leader, who's a simple, backwoods kind of guy, who said bluntly that whatever I saw wasn't asking to get through the gate. I never really understood what he meant by that, until I discovered this subreddit. More to come. I'm going to try to do these in chronological order as fast as I can. As you can guess, they get crazier as we go. They're all in chronological order, starting with my first day out in the desert to my most recent field op deployment, whatever you want to call it. Mountain Edition. After my most recent creepy experience with weird-looking people scaring the fuck out of me, we went somewhere much more terrifying. A remote little Marine Corps base called Bridgeport. It's built to train Marines in the art of mountain warfare. There's a lot of mountains, it's cold, it's windy, and if you ever go there, you will hate your life too. Anyway, when we first get there, we stay in these creepy concrete huts with bunk beds in them. There's a bathroom, some showers, and that's about it. You fight over the outlets to charge your electronics, and there's not really any heat there besides a bunch of Marines crammed into one area. The first few days are miserable. Your body has to adjust to the new altitude. The air has less oxygen, so physical work and exercise plays out in slow motion. Oh, and you're constantly tired and all you want to do is sleep. There isn't much in the terms of fresh food, and, things can get pretty bleak if you have the wrong mindset. You wouldn't believe me if I told you that these were the better times, huh? Eventually, we march up into the mountains, carrying our ridiculously heavy packs, stuffed to the brim with warming layers, food, water, and nicotine. The first few days were pretty easy. We would hike all day, stop, rest, learn a few things about survival and stuff like that. There was some snow on the lower parts, but not a ton, thankfully. Around the fourth night, someone had the awesome idea of making us practice our nighttime navigation skills. I'm a pretty decent navigator myself, so of course I was up to the challenge. No big deal. They hand out the compasses, maps, and protractors, and set up an elaborate system of how to get to the finish line. It was staggered so people weren't walking all over each other. This is where things get interesting. I'm in the woods. It's dark and cold, and I hate my life, so I'm stumbling through the trees and the brush loud as hell without a care in the world. I just want to finish this dumb thing so I can go to sleep. I get to my first point because there's some moonlight shining through the trees. The second point, it was placed in a fucking river, and I still remember how livid I was standing in the river, copying down the word donkey etched into an ammo can on top of a rock, in the middle of a fucking freezing cold river. Wet boots will drive a man insane. I stop to squeeze the moisture out of my socks, and I get this primal feeling that I'm being watched. I stand completely still, but all I can hear is my heart beating. No wind, no wildlife, just me. My first thought is that it's a Marine trying to piggyback off my success. I put my soggy boots back on and do what anyone would do. I crest the next hill so I could stop and listen. Nothing. Maybe I'm just freaking the fuck out. Screw this. I keep walking. 10 minutes later, I get the same feeling again. Any rookie stalker knows that you have to match the person's steps so they don't hear you. So I start to randomly stop or change my step. After a few wholehearted tries, I don't hear any footsteps. But I do hear breathing. If it's a fucking mountain lion or something crazy, I have no choice but to keep walking and hope that I could pull out my stupid dull Gerber knife in time. About this time, I get to my third and final point. It's near a road, so I can cut straight east and literally book it up the road. I still feel like I'm being followed the entire time, but I feel safer because I could hear the low roar of a Humvee engine up the road. Looking back, I led whatever it was right to the rest of us. And that was a dumb mistake. Nothing else happens that night. Everyone else gives up and just uses the road to make it back to camp. Those who don't make it back are told to walk towards the beeping horn. Funny. I finally get to sleep in the safety of numbers. We used the next day to remediate our nighttime land nav skills and refuel our bodies with food. Once the sun sets, we march back off into the mountains in a file. Unfortunately, since I carry a rocket launcher, my natural position is in the back, but not the very last, so at least that's a positive. We spend our early night hiking. We're all moving pretty fast, probably 20 meters spaced apart. At times, it's common to lose sight of each other. All of us are getting pretty exhausted. Suddenly, shit gets dark, like the ambient light is being absorbed. I get that same primal fear. Extreme silence? Yep. Fuck. I keep walking without a word until I hear someone, probably the guy behind me, call my name. I turn around and he looks at me like I'm a fucking idiot. What the fuck? Keep going, dude. They're gonna lose us. Okay. Weird. Who called my name? I spin back around to try to see my way through the bush for the guy in front of me. I get a glimpse of him and discreetly yell at him to slow down, but he doesn't even hear me. What the fuck? About the same time, I hear the dude from behind me. Dude, what the fuck is that? I heard light rustling of leaves and some twigs snap, but that's about it. I run back maybe 15 meters, which isn't far, but at night it is. There's nothing but his backpack on the ground and his rifle. I call his name. Nothing. I reach for my radio. Dead. I turn on both of my flashlights. Dead. Fuck. 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 I start yelling. I blow my rape whistle that they made me pack. Nothing. I don't know how long it took them to realize I was missing, and how they backtracked their way to me, but it felt like hours. I could feel whatever it was out there just waiting, fucking toying with me. I told them everything, and they were convinced that the guy just got lost. They spread out and looked for him for a few hours, but ultimately came up with nothing. Sometime in the next morning, one of the fucking hippie park volunteers found him 30 kilometers away, across multiple mountains. He was bleeding from his ears and didn't even know his own name. Of course, he was in extreme hypothermia and had a ton of bruises on him, but no severe bleeding. They ended up getting a helicopter to take him to the closest hospital. More to come tomorrow. Bonus picture. I snapped this picture on day 3 as we were ascending upwards to give you an idea of how thick things can get and visualize stuff. Also, I made a Twitter specifically to elaborate on certain things, post more pictures, post updates for the story. I'll release the next edition as soon as I finish it on Twitter. I got so many DMs asking me for a second part. I seriously tried my best to answer all of them. I feel really bad and I apologize if I didn't get to you. If this Twitter thing isn't allowed, just let me know if I delete it. Twitter.com/035none. Following the mysterious incident, I was told that I was going to have to go down the mountain to answer a few questions. To be honest, I was relieved. It was cold and I didn't want to hike anymore. Everyone else in my company just sort of believed what they were told. He came down with mountain sickness and just walked 30 kilometers over the course of a few hours. Right. I tried to tell a few people about the creepy shit that I'd been noticing, just to make sure I'm not going crazy. Before anyone could respond, my squad leader pulled me aside and said, "Don't talk about these things, okay?" Maybe he knew something I didn't. But yeah, cool. They sent us up here, knowing something was fucking off. Typical military bullshit. Just stick our heads in the sand and pretend everything is great. I was glad I was leaving for a few days. But there was nothing but complete dread whenever the idea of coming back entered my mind. The Humvee to take me back down finally showed up. The ride was uneventful. They took me to a small, concrete, office-like building. Military police guys were just like me and had a job to do. They got my statement and asked if I noticed anything unusual about the guy before he disappeared. No, he totally seemed normal to me. Then the NCIS guys came in. I've dealt with them before over something else. They're usually pretty good-natured guys. Not these ones. Brisk and to the point. Methodical. They read off all the facts on the case like they were reading nutrition off a cereal box. Unsurprised and monotone. They had definitely seen this before. They asked the same questions. When I told them about all the creepy things I noticed, they told me I was probably suffering from mountain sickness too. I was beyond pissed, but I knew better than to argue with them. Another thing, they asked me if I had taken any pictures that day. I told them I didn't, but I thought that it was strange. Next, they asked me if they could swab my boots. To this day, I am honestly confused as to why the hell they would do that. I didn't know if they were fucking with me at this point or if it was something else. My only assumption is that this thing alters the surrounding area on like a microscopic level. Maybe there was an isotope it produces that stayed on my boots. I have no clue. But if anyone has any similar stories on that they'd like to share, please let me know. At the conclusion of my interview, they made me sign a document stating that I wouldn't talk about anything and they would contact me when I was free to disclose any information. This was a few years ago, and they never got back to me, so it may not be legal to talk about it now, but I have cards up my sleeve. That I won't talk about. Anyway, back to our fabulous 5-star concrete huts to get some sleep. Thankfully, I wasn't alone there. There were a few guys that stayed back because they had sickle cell anemia and could die if they went out to a certain altitude. I took one of the best hot showers I've ever had in my life and then headed back to my bunk. I was exhausted, but I still couldn't sleep. Now, I rarely smoke, but I still carry a pack on me just to make lucrative trades or sell them to desperate nicotine fiends in the field. I felt like, you know what, now's a good time to smoke. So I went outside. Maybe it would calm me down. All was going well until that dreadful feeling came back again. Shit. The tree line is maybe 40 meters away. I don't know how the hell it could have followed me or why. Could there be more than one? I stomped out my cigarette and went back inside. I managed to calm myself down and fall asleep, but I would always wake up suddenly after like maybe 10 minutes. No dreams, just that overwhelming feeling of being observed. The next day I packed up all my gear into the Humvee and helped the driver load some stuff into the back. The drive was uneventful and I managed to catch some sleep, only to be woken up by rough terrain here and there. When we finally arrived, it was almost afternoon and the company was preparing to cover some serious terrain that day. Just my luck. Before I knew it, we were trotting up a deep mountainside. I didn't think it could get any worse until it began to sleet heavily. It was bad. The wind picked up and it felt like being cut with glass. I couldn't see. People were getting lost on the rocks, were slippery. We hiked for hours upon hours. I swear these mountains were trying to kill us. The sun began to set and our clothes began to freeze on us. If that wasn't bad enough, I noticed that our compasses were acting weird. No matter how hard you tried, you would eventually end up walking towards the base of a particular mountain. It was nicknamed the Devil's Incline on our map. This was a military map that someone had made in the 1980s. I don't know if I'll be able to find it. Coincidentally, I also got that same feeling of being stalked again. Fuck. Anyway, our guides led us to the right destination, a place called Sardine Rock. As soon as we stop, people start shaking violently because They're no longer hiking and producing zero body heat. Someone was smart enough to predict this and had two-man tents driven up to our rendezvous point on massive trucks. We rarely use tents, but this was literally a life-or-death situation. To make things worse, the wind picked up and it started to downpour violently. You couldn't even hear yourself talk. It was utter chaos. If you ever set up a tent in the wind, then you know how impossible it is. By the time we had everything staked in, the tents had a few inches of water at the bottom. Our sleeping systems are waterproof, but our entire bodies were soaked to the bone. So they eventually became wet from the outside in. Then the temperature dropped and things got worse. Being in the military, you always have someone on watch. Since there was still sunlight out, I volunteered to stand it while everyone else hid in their tents. Here's a picture I asked my friend Jake to take, just to illustrate the misery. My Cortex rain jacket is completely soaked through. Easily the worst day of my life. Finally, I got back inside the tent and tried to get some rest. I don't remember falling asleep, but I was suddenly woken up by someone outside asking for help. It was the same voice of the guy who ended up 30 kilometers away. Except that guy is still in the hospital. He would call someone's name and say it a few times to try to get them outside. I think it was my squad leader who yelled at everyone to stay the fuck in their tents and not to go outside. For the next few minutes, he practically begged us. It sounded like he was in the tree line maybe 20 meters away, somehow guessing our names. Here it was, trying to break us down when we were at our lowest point. It could have gotten right through our tents, but it wanted to fuck with us. Finally, it stopped, just as I thought it was gone. I heard it say my name twice, in a taunting kind of tone. Then a huge tree came tumbling down. That was it. Thanks, Dick. Traumatized, everyone stayed in their tents until we heard the trucks coming. Over the radio, we were told to pack up our tents in less than 30 seconds and get onto the trucks. We had no more than 5 minutes. I wasn't going to be the first one to step outside, so I waited until a good number of people had got out. I've never seen a group of people move faster in my entire life. The tents were stuffed into their bags, poles bent and bags halfway onto our bodies. People practically stumbled onto the trucks. We were told that we were being evacuated due to the horrible conditions of the mountain, and that we were heading back to base. But we all knew the real reason. I was relieved to be out of the cold, but we were still on this damn mountain and that thing would still be able to find us. When we got back, I showered and got into dry clothes. No one talked. They just went to sleep and tried to understand what had gone down that day. Each and every single one of them realizing that we would likely go back up there in a few days. Here's another picture of a friend taking a break while we stepped off our hike for that day. First and foremost, I want to apologize for the lack of updates. On Wednesday, I had something called duty, which is essentially sitting in the concrete box with the telephone for 24 hours. On Thursday, I got caught up on all of the messages I'd been sent. Now, I left out all of my personal details in my story, and even in the pictures provided. However, I still received a threat via text from an unknown number. It couldn't have been any of my friends because 1, they're all in the field still, and I'm the only one back. 2, because all the pictures I've never shown to anyone. The threat was simple. Keep writing and I'll tell command who you are and what you're saying. My first reaction was to utilize the legal services on base. They assured me that what I'm doing is perfectly fine, as long as I maintain that my stories are not officially endorsed by the USMC. However, I am still beyond creeped out that someone found me. I don't think I'll stop unless something really crazy happens. But we'll find out together, won't we? Anyway, here's my final addition to my time in the mountains. The next morning after being evacuated, everyone was obviously exhausted, and a few guys were sick with pneumonia. Being wet, cold, and nearly scared to death really took a toll. I don't think the incident with the thing on the outside of our tents was talked about in large groups, but it was definitely talked about often on the side. A few guys maintained the fact that it was just a great big prank and laughed it off, but whenever they laughed, it was like they were asking for some sort of validation. Even in the rear, we were kept busy cleaning weapons and gear and getting ready for whatever was next. Our unit has an unexplainable obsession with training. It really cut into our morale, but it made time go by fast. Life seemed pretty normal despite the weather. I stayed indoors at all times unless we were exercising. I didn't have the heart to tell anyone that it was probably watching us from the trees, even if I didn't feel it. The farthest I had ventured was maybe a week after coming down the mountain. The base has a small store with an inventory identical to a gas station. I had gotten tired of what they were feeding us, and my mind had started to rationalize all of my fear away. So, I went. Nothing crazy happened, but I did, however, notice that there were people who were definitely not Marines. These guys were big, burly, and sported full beards. I pretended to look at a selection of Doritos and caught a glimpse of a particular trident tattoo. This meant whoever this person was a Navy SEAL, currently or at some point. I wonder about the other guys. I approached the bearded guy and asked if he was a SEAL. He turned around to look at me and he simply looked at me and said, "Yeah, sure. How'd you know?" Tattoo's a dead giveaway. I used to see my college roommate hang all that motivational shit up over the room. "Oh, really?" was all he said. I didn't really know what to say, but I wanted to impress him. "Yeah, he's actually a SEAL now." His demeanor got a little friendlier. "No shit, what's his name?" "Kurtz, he's an officer." "Is his first name Walter?" "Yeah, it is. Do you know him?" "Do I know him?" "He's outside smoking a cigarette." A little info on my friend. We worked out a lot together, as we both had a sick fascination with pain, either running, hiking, or swimming. We would torture ourselves nearly every day until he left. I kept up with him as much as I could with the training cycles. Then he just disappeared. I'm talking gone. On every social media platform, everything. I talked to his parents and all they got from him was the occasional letter. It always bothered the hell out of me that he straight up disappeared from the world without saying a damn thing. I thought about it nearly every day. And there he was, outside. All I wanted to do was get one good punch in. Navy SEAL or not, he's still a dick. When we stepped outside and I saw him, I still hated his guts. But I had a feeling that me and a bunch of SEALs probably wasn't gonna work, despite having the power of God and anime on my side. He didn't even notice me until I said his name. In any other settings, I probably would have saluted him since he was an officer and I was just enlisted scum, but I didn't give a shit. He seemed genuinely happy to see me and wouldn't let go of my hand. We did some catching up, mostly questions from him about my boring life. Whenever I would ask him stuff, he would either deflect and make a joke or give me a one-word answer. The man just wouldn't elaborate on what he's been up to. After about 10 minutes of talking, the group decided they were done stocking up on Mountain Dew and gummy worms. Before they headed back, Kurtz pulled me to the side and threw his cigarette on the ground with a look of complete concern and worry. He said, "Listen, you really shouldn't go back up there. This ain't the place you want to be. You understand?" I wasn't really sure what to say. I just nodded solemnly before he shook my hand and left. That was the last time I'd be able to talk or see him. One thing to note is that the group of guys didn't all have beards and tattoos. Don't get me wrong here, but Navy SEAL guys have a certain look. I can't explain it unless you've been around them long enough, but not everyone in that group was a SEAL. I saw a guy wearing an army-related shirt, so I'm assuming they were some kind of cross-branch team. Anyway, I headed back to the concrete motels and spent some time reading, just trying to get my mind off of what he had said. Should I break my ankle or pretend to be sick? They don't have Uber up here and the highway is some distance away. Ultimately, I decided that my pride was more important than my life, and I ended up going back into the mountains. I felt nothing but dread. Here I was, being stalked and harassed by some thing, and on top of that, the Marine Corps is destroying my body every day. My human body isn't designed to hike 175 kilometers in a week with 200 pounds of gear, let alone up mountains. However, sometimes you get a break. The hikes were relatively short, and all we did was practice our rock climbing skills at night. After about 3 weeks in the mountains, my body started to get used to the altitude and the amount of physical activity that we were doing. I was counting down the days in my head every few minutes, making quick calculations and crunching the numbers on each activity and how much closer I was to safety. Things weren't going to be that easy, of course not. I had a pretty decent amount of anxiety and dread the entire time, but I rationalized with it just in my mind. I didn't notice it until the third day. We had peaked one of the larger mountains that we were headed towards the Devil's Incline. It had to be a mistake. Because the compasses have been acting weird, right? Well, I talked to one of the higher-ups and sure enough, that was our final destination, because the CO thought that it would be a challenge. Great. They're leading us straight to our deaths. Dulce et decorum-esque kind of deal. The closer we got, the worse I felt about the whole thing. I couldn't sleep for more than 10 minutes because I swear I could feel it watching me. Not wanting to go crazy, I confided in my squad leader and all he said was, "Yeah, I feel it. Don't want to talk about it." The next day, we were briefed with our final training exercise. Our job was to assault the Devil's Peak Incline. A vast majority of it would be climbing using carabiners and rope, and traditional technique. The final 500 meters is mostly gravel and can be traversed on foot. We would be provided overwatch by special forces operating in the area. Nothing new. The military is really imaginative. If we see them, ignore them. We begin the assault at sunset and get to the middle of the mountain around midnight. Everything's going pretty smooth. We're climbing the cliff slowly and methodically. On one particularly large cliff, I set up one of the anchor points so that the Marines can rappel from the other side of the cliff. I turn around and head for the next cliff, but before I start to climb, someone angrily asked me why the hell I cut the rope and that I could have gotten someone killed. I respond that I didn't cut it and head back to see what the hell happened. The rope? The rope was sliced perfectly, like surgically. If you ever cut climbing rope before, you know that it almost is impossible to get a clean cut. You'll always end up with a little bit of fraying, even with the sharpest of knives. This rope has no fraying at all. I'm assuming that it was the same thing that's been harassing us all month, trying its best to kill one of us. Fortunately, there weren't many cliffs after that. The 500-meter slope of gravel turned out to be way too steep to hike straight up. Also, out of nowhere, a blizzard decided to make our lives hell. To this day, I've never seen such horrible weather. We're talking 70-mile-an-hour winds, whiteout conditions, everything. It was just insane. On the way up, I swore I was going to freeze to death. The slope seemed like it was never going to end. After about 3 hours, someone mentioned that multiple Marines were missing. Our first reaction was to stop and sit there for an hour, then send half of us back down in an attempt to find the Marines. That was the coldest I have ever been in my life. At least hiking provided some warmth, but sitting there being buried alive in the snow and wind, it was bad. I don't know who made the call to keep pushing forward to the top, but it was the only way anyone was going to survive. There was a road on the other side of the mountain with vehicles most likely waiting for us. There was no use in kicking around for any more Marines in the snow because things were just getting worse. Pretty much everyone had some form of frostbite. We just didn't have the right gear to protect ourselves. Finally, we get to the top and thankfully there's tents waiting for us. The tent I got was so broken that I ended up piling in with a bunch of other guys like sardines. What a shit show that was, setting up in the wind. They gave us maybe 20 minutes while they figure out what to do about the missing guys. I'm assuming that they called the proper authorities way before that. It was too windy for helicopters and nearly impossible for us to search the area. A wrong gust of wind could literally throw us down the mountain, tumbling face first. Their solution first was to use thermal optics at the top to search for the guys. Nothing. Then we all got in a big line and held hands as we walked down the mountain. Nothing. Granted, we didn't bring 200 pounds of crap with us, so it was a lot easier walking back up. But by now it was 4 a.m. and things just seemed to be getting worse. They told us to go back to our tents and warm up for 20 minutes because guys were literally turning into zombies. Now, this is quite possibly the weirdest part. For the next 12 hours, nobody remembers what the hell happened. Everyone woke up in the tents and have zero recollection. It was daytime now and everything was covered in snow. A few of the Special Forces guys, including Kurtz, were all talking to my higher-ups about something. I didn't find out until later that the SF dudes, Special Forces, found all of our missing guys at various locations. Not 30 kilometers far, but not much shorter, like 5 to 10 kilometers. Ears bleeding too. While it's not impossible to hike in a few hours, it's damn hard to get lost on a mountain where your only objective is to go up. Not to the side, not around, not down. Up, damn it. We radioed into base camp and they sent up special vehicles in the snow to get us. They kinda resembled half-tracks. The same day, they loaded us up on these special snow trucks and told us that we're going back to barracks. When we got there, they debriefed us on how successful our mission was and some bullshit about accountability of guys. Blah, blah, blah. In any other situation, they would have definitely lost their jobs if they lost a Marine. Just not in Bridgeport, I guess. We packed up our bags that night and got woken up around 3 a.m. to get bussed back to the desert. I was extremely relieved not to be back. No one ever talked about our time there again. The guys who disappeared came back from the hospital saying that they don't remember anything or that they didn't want to talk about it. Never go to Bridgeport, folks. Bonus pictures. Here's a picture of me sitting on the rock at the base of the Devil's Incline. To this day, I don't know what the hell the distortion is, and I honestly could not have done that if I tried. This could be why the NCIS guys asked if I had taken any pictures. I obviously blurred out my face and serial number. I'm talking about the bottom half of the photo. And here's some creepy old buildings that I found on the way there. I wonder why they were abandoned. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at 035none for more pictures. Guys, this is just the first part of this series. Make sure you legitimately do go follow 035none on Twitter. It's got some pretty good stuff on there. And while you're over on Twitter, make sure you follow me too, at RealCreepSin. It's a good Twitter to follow. And now I would like to thank my $10 and above patrons in descending order: Paul Z, Mr. Swiston, Official Jerboa, Chaos X, JY, Pyromancer, Hayden MH, and Dan R. Guys, thank you so much. You make this possible, and I really appreciate it. And if you want to be mentioned at the end of the video and get access to some Patreon-only content, definitely go hit that up. Thank you for watching, everyone.